Hello, Tom Lavecchia here with the latest edition of the Armchair MBA. I have a very special guest, and I'm going to need a minute to read all of his accomplishments, because if I read all of his accomplishments, we'd be here for a half hour. Signor Antonio Nicaso, he is an Italian author, university professor, researcher, speaker, consultant to multiple governments and law enforcement agencies. Originally hails from Calabria, Italy, now lives in Toronto. He is the expert on probably the most powerful yet lesser known borgadas, if you will, the Calabrian Mafia, also known as Ndrangheta. And he lives in Canada. He teaches courses at multiple universities, Queen's University in Ontario, St. Jerome's University in Waterloo, and also Middlebury College in Oakland, California. So before we start, Signor Nicaso, grazie per essere venuto alla mia show e vorrei offrire il massimo rispetto e ammirazione per il suo lavoro.
Grazie,
Mr. Nicaso, welcome to the Armchair MBA. How are you doing today?
Fantastic. Thank you for having me, Tom.
It's my pleasure. So I want to start. Give us your formative years, where you started, where you grew up, where you were born, and how did you start to migrate to become you?
Okay, I was born in Calabria in southern Italy. And when I was 6.5, the father of a schoolmate was killed by the local mafia because he refused to purchase some material, construction material.
Yeah.
And I remember that event because it was a kind of collective tragedy. When I asked to my parents the reason of the murder, they were not able to provide me an answer. And that was similar to what happened in the town. No one stood up, no one went to police to report anything. And I think that moment I decided to choose knowledge rather than indifference. Yeah. And I started to collect news clips, put together a kind of archive, and that was a way to document everything happened in my area. And I think that event triggered the interest for the study of organized crime.
What area in Calabria, if you don't mind me asking?
It's my hometown is Caulonia, which is a town in the Reggio Calabria province.
Yeah, I have my brother-in-law, his family from Catanzaro, Spielinga. It's a small little town. I don't think too far from that. I think more about an hour or so. So I'm very familiar with the Calabrian culture. My family hails from about 2 hours west of Napoli, which in many ways is alike, but many ways different. So just like other organized crime organizations, as you observed them as you went along, the Ndrangheta took a totally different path versus Cosa Nostra, versus Camorra, and the American, even the Canada Mafia. Give us a little bit about the migration of Ndrangheta and then what made it important today.
But the Ndrangheta was born at the same time of the Sicilian Mafia. They have not arisen from the struggle between the rich and the poor, yeah, the powerless and the powerful. And that's one thing that we have to keep in mind. Criminal organization, especially the mafia and mafia type criminal organization, are power system. Well connected to social elite with an extensive reach around the world. You mentioned the Ndrangheta. The Ndrangheta is one of the world's most powerful and lesser known Italian mafia criminal organization.
Yes.
For decades, the Ndrangheta was invisible like the dark side of the moon.
Yep.
And I think the success of this organization lies in how they were able to combine tradition and innovation. And also because at one point, while Cosa Nostra was challenging the state,
Yes.
the Calabrian Mafia decided to invest in the cocaine
Yep.
business, and they became probably one of the most powerful organization in the cocaine shipment and cocaine business in the world.
Now, but prior to that, because I want to follow the progression and kind of as Ndrangheta grew, and then also your career as an expert. So they started out with kidnapping. I remember when I was young, I just kept saying a lot of Calabrians would not be careful about going to certain towns because if you're American, if there's situations, there's actually a kidnapping season. So my understanding is they would start with kidnapping, and again, I don't justify what they do, but from a business perspective, it was brilliant because they would start with kidnapping, which is a high margin business, and then dump that into the cocaine. So if you could speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, Tom, you are absolutely right. They started with kidnapping, but we have to remember that Ndrangheta was born in the first half of 1800.
Yes.
And they were well connected with the social elite. They were able to survive during the fascist regime, and they were well strong and well organized after the Second World War. So I think they made the headline for the first time in 1973.
The Getty kidnapping?
Getty kidnapping, yeah. Exactly. That was the moment when the world, for the first time, heard this unpronounceable word, Ndrangheta. and that was one of many hundreds of kidnapping. I remember Covert has a crime reporter, the last part of this profitable business. And then, as you mentioned, the modern mafia was born in the 80s when it moved into cocaine, leaving the less lucrative heroin trade to Cosa Nostra.
Yes.
And I think the idea to invest the ransom from kidnapping was a brilliant idea because they were able to move people in many places. I have to mention also that unlike the Sicilian Mafia, the Ndrangheta has a structure based on blood ties.
Yes.
And so imagine to have people living in Colombia, in Bolivia, in Peru, in Brazil, and married with the people over there. So extended the family concept. For brokers of the Ndrangheta married to Colombian women was easier to get shipment of cocaine without leaving an hostage like the Sicilian Mafia had to do. They were trusted because they were part of the community, so they were able to put together a huge shipment of cocaine, not only for themselves, but also for other criminal organizations. And that was a brilliant idea because they were able to purchase without provide money in advance. There was a strong sense of trust for this idea of family concept, family oriented business. They were all related in some way.
Yeah.
And those brokers were instrumental to arrange huge shipment of cocaine. I'll tell you a story. It's called Operation Egress. At one point, the Sicilian Mafia purchased a huge shipment of cocaine, and the man in between was Salvatore Micheli. Just to give you the idea of how powerful was this man, his nickname was the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Cosa Nostra. So he arranged a shipment. The shipment of cocaine was sent to Sicily and then seized by police. He was unable to pay, and he was in the hand of the Colombians that kept him as an hostage.
Yeah.
He had a really good friend, and this guy was a powerful broker for the Ndrangheta. And he called and said, leave him alone. I guarantee for him. And that was the way he obtained freedom and was able to return to Sicily.
Wow.
So that's the type
just
of
a simple phone call to give background to the color. And I, part of this show is about is looking at organized crime, but also the business end. And my understanding, they got into cocaine for this reason. And with all due respect, if it's a heroin addict, lower price points, those users tend to go, to jail or die, or, are not necessarily, and I hate to say this, but maybe lower end users. Whereas cocaine, it's the aristocracy, people with money, and people may stop using cocaine, but there's more than people coming in and leaving, much better margins, and maybe not easy to transport, but easier because, the relationship with the ports. So my understanding from the business perspective, they said, you know what, we're going to pick our lane. We're going to be the coke people. We're going to do it well. We're going to develop the relationships, which we'll get to in a moment. And the people that use our stuff will spend money for it, and there will always be a market. Versus the heroin market, as I understood, not only did they want to leave it to the Cosa Nostra, but they felt it to be a declining market. Can you speak to that strategy a little bit?
Yeah, the Sicilian Mafia was able to control the heroin shipment early in the 60s, in the 70s. And they were well connected at one point with the American counterpart.
Yes.
The success of that business was the idea to combine the production and the distribution.
Correct.
They were able to set up laboratories in Sicily, in Palermo, in Trapani, to refine the heroin, and then they had the market, the huge American market.
Yes.
At that time, cocaine was the drug of the establishment, as you mentioned, the stars, the people, the jet set, and it cost more than heroin, of course. And that was the great intuition of the Ndrangheta, especially when they were able to enter in contact with the Cali and the Medellin cartel. And they took advantage of a season of overproduction in Colombia. So they were not able to send all the cocaine in their market in the United States, and they had the warehouses stacked with cocaine. And I think in that moment, there was a disagreement with Ndrangheta. Ndrangheta understood that the cocaine can become a drug used by many, not only from the rich people. And that was the turning point in the strategy of the Ndrangheta. Also because they were able to invest the money, so they had a great power structure. If you're thinking it's more anecdotal than based on real figures, but an estimate make the Ndrangheta to be more profitable than the Deutsche Bank and McDonald's put together.
And Facebook even.
Yes, and with an estimate, and I want to emphasize the word, an estimate turnover of 55 billion euros. So when you have all of that money, you need to have also a system in place to invest the money. You can't keep the money in cash. Correct. And I think the idea of bonding social capital to create a cohesive organization was important, but was also important to bridging social capital, to create a kind of network of trust, to have people in the upper world capable to invest money, to identify places less resilient in the fight against organized crime. I'm thinking about Canada, for example. With the shell companies, you can invest money and you don't have to share with the authorities who's the real owner of the investment. And that's great if you consider what they are able to do through offshore countries, means that they have in place not only a criminal organization, but also a power system, a network of trust, something that can help criminals to invest money worldwide. And that's
that's where the fabric comes in.
Yes, of the Ndrangheta success, because you can have all the business of the world, but if you are not able to identify places where you can invest that money, it's worthless.
Yeah. Now, before we graduate to their expansion internationally, which is just as fascinating, we know as Italians, they call the Sicilian mafiosi, Omni di Onore, all these different Godfather-like names. The Calabrians are known as the Honored Society. In your honest opinion, I'm dying to this. If I had to ask you one question, probably would be this. Well, actually, a few other ones that I'm dying to ask you, but this one is: in America in the 50s, 60s, 70s, if you know the local mafiosi, you were protected. They took care of the neighborhood. They were called Goodfellas. I don't know if you ever heard that term, Goodfellas, yes. Right? Well, yes. Did the Calabrians start out honorable and then got into a dishonorable business, or has it always been Buggiaro all the way? Like, give me your. I'm dying to hear this answer.
No, I think that as you said, Sicilian mafiosi, Calabrian mafiosi represent themselves as men of honor, who solve problems without resorting to state-established law. And that is the idea of the cavalleria rusticana, the rustic chivalry. But I think it's a different kind of honor. It's a self-service notion of honor that helps them to remove any sense of guilty, to transform them from murderer to people that provide
the protector,
sense of justice. Yes, and that's is what they like to represent themselves. Because if we go back in history, the mafia, the Sicilian mafia, have not arisen from the struggle between poor and rich. They were never on the side of the poor against the rich, or the weak against the strong. They were always, actually, if we want to use one word to synthesize, summarize the origin of the Sicilian Mafia, we can say that the Sicilian Mafia is the product of the ruling classes of the city.
That's right.
They need the vigilantes. They need the people to protect the landowners. And that's how the mafia started.
And they became the landowners themselves.
Exactly. They became the landowners themselves. And that's the history. But as you know, any social group need a foundation myth.
A story.
A story to legitimize themselves. And I think in this sense, the Yakuza, the Triads, the Vori Zacogna, the Ndrangheta, the Camorra, the Sicilian Mafia, Cosa Nostra, they all have a foundation myth. It's our ability to distinguish fact from myth and deconstruct the origin of the mafiosi as men of honors. How many times we heard, we never killed a woman, we never killed children. The history of the Sicilian Mafia, the Calabrian Mafia is full of murders of women and children. So one part, it's what they use to present themselves.
Because their marketing PR department,
Exactly.
See, it's a business. So, okay, so now we're going to get into another area that I'm semi-obsessed with, is they now expand internationally, right? Now I have it's interesting. So when you meet somebody, if somebody says, "Oh, I have a cousin in Australia, I have a cousin in Argentina," I automatically say you're Calabrian. And I'm right 90% of the time. So they follow the immigration, right? So they go to Australia, which we'll get to, Argentina, Venezuela, and so forth, Canada. But I kind of want to take a little respite on the Ndrangheta, and I want to get to who are the Curana Contrera. I got to read your book. I when I read the 30 of your books, I don't know, you follow them. Talk about ghosts and a local car wash owner in Canada, small Italian businessman. Walk us through, walk us through who they are and why they're important to this whole transnational drug operation.
The Contrera Caruana were two families from Siciliana in Agrigento province. And in some way, they follow the pattern of the Calabrian Mafia.
Yes.
They start to marry among themselves, and they create this great family concept that made them very strong and able to spread all over the place. They left Sicily, they moved in Brazil, then in Venezuela, then in the United States, then in England, then in Switzerland, then in Canada. So they were all over the place.
Yeah.
And they were able to secure huge shipment of cocaine thanks to the contact that they had in Latin America. They had a well-established business in Venezuela at the border with many other countries. And so they were able to arrange a huge shipment for everyone. At one point in Margarita Island, they were the first one to arrange a meeting with the brokers from the Camorra, broker from Ndrangheta, and they create this strong, powerful synergy agreement that help them to succeed in the sense that they were able to purchase huge shipment of cocaine because they work like shareholders. They ask the Calabrian Mafia to invest 30%, the Camorra to invest another 30%. They cover the rest. And so that was the strategy. And then after the 1992, the Contrera brothers were arrested, extradited to Italy from Venezuela and convicted. And so there was a cousin of the Contrera brothers, Caruana, Alfonso Caruana, who was a ghost, was wanted in Italy, wanted everywhere, but no one really was aware of his location. And one day he appeared in a wedding, and they checked the name and the date, and everything matched the date and the place of birth of the wanted man. But when the Canadian police shared the photo with the Italian, the Italian said, no, it's not him. And the reason was that the Italian had a wrong picture of him in their file. And so that was thanks to the determination of some Canadian police officers and another Italian police officer now based in Turin, that they were able to investigated, follow him, get a card. At that time, there was a phone card that they were used to make a telephone call. And they were able to match their fingerprints. And that was the end of the long escape of this man called the Ghost, that was a very important drug brokers. At one point, imagine, he arranged a shipment to Italy, and the Italian police was able to confiscate the shipment. It was more than 5,000 kilos at the time, one of the largest seizure in Europe. And
caught in Milan, right?
That was near Genova.
Genova, okay.
Genova was the shipment port, but the seizure was in Borgaro Torinese, near Turin.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so and to read about the, and I always thought it was, okay, so it's Contrada Coriana. Make sure you check. I'm going to put a link for that book specifically amongst other books, because for those that are into the mob stuff, they're like the invisible. It's insane. He covers it. I'm going to read more on it. So as we talk about Ndrangheta advancing, I do want to kind of migrate a little over to the mafia landscape in Canada. The reason why I say mafia landscape specifically is because you had Rizzutos in Montreal, you had the Calabrians in Woodbridge, the Sicilians won, the Calabrians kind of came back, and this. So my two-part question. Number one is, how has Ndrangheta and the Italian Canadese organized crime get along? And number two, why has Canadian organized crime, this is strictly my opinion, rose head and shoulders of even American Cosa Nostra? So I just want to kind of, I know it's a loaded question, but we'll talk about the Canadian landscape, and then why do you think, I believe, or if you believe, how they compare to the American Cosa Nostra?
Well, first of all, the Ndrangheta was, still is, a well-established criminal organization in Canada. The first time the Canadian police learned about the presence in Canada of Ndrangheta bosses was in 1911. Then, of course, the Ndrangheta was able to establish an organization, a structure after the 1950s. What happened with the so-called Sicilian Mafia was a different kind of history, in the sense that what the Rizzuto crime family, and before them, Vito Vic Cotroni, was to create branches of the Bonanno family.
Yes.
But branches more similar to the American Mafia rather than the Sicilian Mafia. I try to explain this concept. If you're thinking about the American La Cosa Nostra, in the American La Cosa Nostra, there were people like Vito Genovese, he was from Naples.
Yes.
People like Frank Costello, Albert Anastasia from Calabria, and then Lucchese, Gambino, Bonanno from Sicily.
Yeah.
So a kind of criminal melting pot. If you go in Sicily, in the Corleonese families, in any other families in Sicily, it's unlikely to see Calabrians or Neapolitans as made members.
Yeah.
But in the United States was a different concept, a different idea. They had to get together to face issue and problems with other criminal gangs, the Irish, the Jews, and so on. So they could not divide among Italians, among criminals of Italian descent.
Yeah.
And so the idea of having in Canada a similar structure with the people like De Rizzuto from Sicily, Francesco Arcadi from Calabria, Rocco Sollecito from Apulia, give them an opportunity to create the same kind of structure of an American families. Of course, they were into narcotics since the beginning.
Yeah.
Because the patriarch of the Rizzuto crime family was in Venezuela. At one point, he was arrested for drug trafficking. Yes. He had a connection with the Contrera Caruana. Yeah. Actually, one of the Contrera was a close friend and associate to the Rizzuto. And so they were able to create something that was that did not have any precedent in the history. And what they created was a consortium. The idea that there was this Canadian mafia that at one point cut the link with the Americans, and then there were Hells Angels.
Yes.
Through them, they had opportunity to distribute narcotics across Canada. And then street gangs, people who were involved in the selling aspect of this
Correct
business. And so this idea to have all together and to share the profit was, I believe, the secret of the success of Vito Rizzuto.
Interesting.
The Ndrangheta never changed its nature. They remain always the same, but in Ontario, they are a power force. And at one point, Rizzuto tried to move into Ontario, but he failed at the end. And so we can say now that the Rizzuto are still in power, but not like they used to be in Quebec. The Ndrangheta is well and strong placed and positioned in Ontario.
Wow. So I remember, because I being an American, and the theory was the Rizzuto, they called them the Sixth Family. They were aligned with the Bananas. Rizzuto himself came here for that hit on the Three Captains. Americans in New York, Italians in New York, we're number one, we're number one. In my opinion, I think they grew so strong that the prominence of the Rizzuto family, and I don't know about now, but it usurped that of all the five families. And I want to give some context to that. So the first is, I remember I saw some big, first the son got hit, Rizzuto's son, then the father, then the brother-in-law, and then the second cousin. So like what I did was one day is I set up a Google alert, right? Because I was trying to follow more of Canadian organized crime. And I'm like, I think I put in, Cotroni, I put in Rizzuto, I put in mob, murder, every day. A killing. I'm talking like a bombing, murder. So this is akin to the Italian American Cosa Nostra. Up until the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of killing, but there's something yesterday that happened. So why is the Canadian organized crime? Why is there still so much violence? It's insane.
Violence is an important component when you put together a criminal organization.
Yes.
They are violent, they are criminals, but they try to avoid violence. And you can avoid violence when there is a very stable balance of power.
Yes.
When there is no conflict. Yeah. Unfortunately, in Canada, there is an imbalance of power. The Rizzuto, they were too strong, too powerful, able to put together all the resources available on their territory. Now, they are not the same organization that they used to be. And now there are so many other that they're looking for power to have their portion of a profit. And so when you have those kind of imbalance in the power, the violence, it's a component that make everyone to strike, make everyone to make a move. And that's what happened in Canada today. There is a huge market. Canada is a great market, not only for narcotics, but also for investment.
Yes.
In Canada, it's really easier to launder money compared to the United States.
Yes.
If you eliminate countries like Delaware, it's really difficult in the United States to deal with the money laundering, especially after the Patriot Act. But in Canada, Canada is a kind of criminal microcosm. And why it's a criminal microcosm? Because any major criminal organization in the world has a branch in Canada. And not necessarily to control a turf, but to invest money.
Yes.
We discovered, for example, at one point during the El Chapo Guzman trial in Brooklyn, that a young man enrolled but never attended in a college in British Columbia was the broker of El Chapo in Vancouver. And at one point, El Chapo sent him an email and asked to provide a daily update of the sellings. The FBI was able to intercept those conversations, those exchange of messages. And the FBI learned that at that point, the Sinaloa cartel sold more cocaine in Canada than the United States.
Wow.
And that's another way to look at Canada. Canada, if you asking around, it's a kind of a country that doesn't have this reputation to be a violent one, or a country with the largest presence of criminals. But I think the perception for people outside Canada underestimated the importance of this country. Now, the Sinaloa cartel is in Canada, well established, not only in British Columbia, but across Canada. And they are a component of this criminal milieu. But I can identify so many other criminal groups with a strong and local presence in Canada. That's a clear indication that Canada, for criminals, is one of the best countries in the world, because there is a lower risk of prosecution and detention compared to the United States and many other countries in the world.
Well, it's interesting enough and to give again another example, is Salvatori Montano was a boss, and you're historian, a Bonanno boss, leaves New York because he had to, goes to Canada, tries to muscle in, and finds his way on the wrong side of a bullet. That so, and with no recourse, was the commission in New York got together, like they said, leave us alone. So I know, like, it intersects the different worlds. What was your take on that when you heard about that?
Montano was forced to leave the United States,
yes,
because a previous condition. He never had, he was an alien. He never had an American citizenship. Yeah. And so he had to choose between Italy and Canadian. He had dual citizenship. Yeah. He chose the Canadian, and he joined force with the right-hand man of Vito Rizzuto, Desjardins, Renaud Desjardins. And they were together in this unprecedented challenging to the Rizzuto. At one point, they start to fight because they disagree on the amount of the money they had to ask to a prominent businessman in Canada, and they end up in a war. And so Montano tried to kill the Renaud Desjardins and failed, and then Desjardins mastermind the killing of Montano. Montano was killed, but Montano loved the
We had a quick freeze. So you were saying Montano loved Canada, and if you could finish that sentence.
Montano loved Canada, but he loved Ontario better than Quebec because of the language. He suffered he was in Quebec because he didn't know the language, the French Canadian. And so he traveled several times to Ontario, tried to establish link with the local bosses of the Ndrangheta. So probably if he would survive, the final destination would be more Ontario or British Columbia rather than than Quebec.
Yeah.
But he was one of those people who challenged Rizzuto when, as you mentioned earlier, Rizzuto was extradited to the United States to face charge for the three Capitan murders of 1911 and 1981, and he started to be on the defensive side because his family was the target of this unprecedented challenge.
Wow. So we're gonna migrate over to the U.S. before we wrap up. But so what I'm gathering here, if you notice in our conversations, right, there's a lot of war, a lot of fighting, a lot going on. But I think where Ndrangheta wins outside of Italy, it operates more like the CIA than the infantry. It looks like it gets to an area, it causes some problems, and kind of sells to the winner. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, it's a fair assessment in the sense that the Ndrangheta now is a truly globalized criminal organization.
Yeah.
You mentioned Australia. The Ndrangheta now is exploring the Asian market.
Wow.
They are all over the place in Europe. They are in Africa. They are in North and South America. So it's really powerful forces. Of course, they are dynamic, and the Ndrangheta now is choosing to keep a low profile and try to invest money to arrange a shipment of cocaine. They learn a lot from the Sicilian mistake. Because the idea of challenging the government, the state in the 90s, forced the government to react, and that was practically the end, the beginning of the end of the Corleonese family. I think only one major bosses of the Corleonese is still around.
Yeah.
Ndrangheta learned from that mistake, and they try to avoid violence. They use violence when it's strictly necessary. And they try to keep a low profile, to invest money. And the idea of this network, like to have relatives in Australia, relatives in Bolivia, in Peru, in Colombia, in any place in Europe, in Canada, in the United States, make them really a strong organization.
Yes.
Because you don't have to, you don't rely on a stranger. You rely to your cousin, to your brother-in-law, and so it's harder to infiltrate them. It's harder to identify informants in the organization. I know that something is changing in Calabria because children of powerful bosses are now turning as informant, but the numbers are very few.
Oh yeah.
You compare the informant in the Calabrian Mafia with the informant in the Sicilian and the Neapolitan Mafia.
Oh, much lower incidence. I read, well, two things. One is I heard and you're right. So Ndrangheta operates as a global organization. I don't know where that money goes and how, like, first of all, you go to Calabria, it's still somewhat of a poor region, but basically the heads of each of the clans and the families are there. However, I understood that the clan, I don't know if it's a dad or no, or which one, is so powerful that it's actually considered its own, not only branch in Ndrangheta, but that they report to no one. I don't know. I just heard that somewhere. I don't know if that's true, but I heard.
Is not true in the sense that the Ndrangheta has a group of people they call the crimine, and they are the people that authorize the opening of any branches. It's not like the Sicilian Mafia with a structure which is a military structure.
Correct.
Bosses. The Calabria, there is no bosses of bosses.
Correct.
The capo crimine is more a chairman rather than a boss of bosses.
Yes.
But if you don't report to them, if you don't share with them, if you don't inform them, you may have issue and problem, like someone called Carmelo Novella in Milan.
Yeah.
At one point he said, we have the market, we have a Milan, we have the Lombardy, why we need to report to Calabria?
Yeah.
I think we can create our own Ndrangheta. And he was killed.
Probably not end well.
And he was killed. So the idea that the Siderno group was a powerful, and still is a powerful group, but it's the locale of Siderno having ramification worldwide. They were able to create other entities in Canada, in Australia, in the United States, and in Italy, in Turin, there is a ramification, a locale that is strictly connected to Siderno. So it's one of the most powerful clan, they call the locale, within the Ndrangheta. But I think that the Ndrangheta, it's an organization with a board of directors, and you cannot do whatever you want without inform them. And so I disagree with the idea that in Canada, at one point, there was a group of people that really could manage to avoid any connection or direction from the Crimine, the board of directors of the Ndrangheta.
Now, you brought up Deutsche Bank earlier, and then we'll get to the U.S. I know if it was up to me, you'd be here forever, but we'll wrap up soon. But I was also reading that, we talk about Deutsche Bank and banking, right? I read somewhere that let's say you and I had a magic wand, and we can somehow say Ndrangheta goes away, the cocaine trade goes away. I heard just with Italian organized crime, if it was somehow wiped off the earth, that 7 economies would collapse. Do you agree with that statement, or is that a little too maybe a conspiracy theory, or is that something you would align with?
It's a little bit a stretch. It's an exaggeration. What I'm comfortable to say is that the drug money is not a parallel economy, but it's an integrated one.
Yes.
And it's very important.
Yeah.
But I have a time to believe that the 6 economy could collapse, but of course they will damage the economy, because now there is no issue in accepting drug money into the legal economies.
Correct.
And now everybody count on that money, and it's a fact.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not an economist. I can speculate on any issue related to this idea of withdraw the money from the economy. What will be the impact? I don't know. But really, at this time, what I see, this is probably the easier time in history to launder money.
Yeah.
Because
cryptocurrency
there is no ethic aspect, and so anyone is not looking. Money has no smell. It's an old, and this is prevalent today. And many people accept drug money because it's part of the economy. When you're looking at the Pandora papers, the Panama papers, you see that they all use the same system to launder money. Yeah. So criminals are not looking for something special. Like when you're thinking about the money laundering aspect, you don't see that the criminals are using a niche, a special market. No, they use the same system, the same market. They are all together. That they use the same people, the same office, same lawyers, same chartered account, same brokers. And there are people that use this mechanism to avoid paying taxes.
Yes.
Other people, because they want to invest in to have a better margin. Other people, because they want to hide the origin of the money.
Good point.
So it's really easy.
So being all integrated, right? And again, we'll round it out with here in America. Why didn't the Ndrangheta make a bigger presence here in the United States, especially since there were up to 26 families, five local families in New York. I know they were traditionally aligned with Cosa Nostra in Sicily. Why didn't Ndrangheta, and I know there's some rumblings, there was one operation with some local mafiosi in the Genovese family, but why do you think the Ndrangheta overall stayed away from the American Mafia as well as the United States market?
I think that more than stay away, I think the Ndrangheta never looking for a turf in the United States. My feeling is that the Ndrangheta at the moment, they have a strong presence in the United States, but it's a different type of presence.
Yeah.
They are not looking to control an area, but they're looking to make agreement with other criminal groups.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Genovese, but there is a long history of a connection between the Ndrangheta and the Gambino family.
Yes, yes.
And I think at the moment, Ndrangheta has powerful branches in the state of New York, in Florida, and many other states. Actually, during a conversation intercepted in Italy, the Italian police get the sense that they are now able to establish locali, so strike a clan in the United States. And they suspect that Ndrangheta has some locali in the New York State. So it's a change, because before they had people, now they have an established group. What happened? What will be the future of this change? I don't know, but I have the sense that the Ndrangheta is paying more attention than before to the United States market.
It's a great point. And then we're gonna round this out soon. What the American Mafia, American Cosa Nostra, like we talked about a lot of different organizations, Ndrangheta, Canadian Mafia, some subsets there. We touched on Camorra, but the American Mafia has been in a steady state of decline, right? So why do you think that is? And do you think they'll ever rebound, or is it more a dinosaur in your opinion?
But my feeling is that they are down. That's it's, but not out of the game. And I would never write an obituary to the Sicilian, to the American Mafia, because they have the resources to move and to adapt. There was an interesting story. Was a story about the arrest of. You may have more information than me, of Andrew Mash Russo.
Yes,
the boss of the Colombo family, and I remember reading that one of the members of the Colombo was arrested because he tried to extort money from a union leader by using text messages. Now, at one point said, "This is the second text that is
not gonna third.
Could be the third," you know, and they complained by the old guard to this new guard using more social network and more this new technologies. And I think that it's the most important aspect to understand the future of the American Mafia. If they will be able to adapt to this new situation, to use cryptocurrency, to adapt to the digitalization of communication, of selling and everything, I think they will survive.
Wow.
But I think now we are looking more to a kind of a dark mafia, the dark web type of internet, rather than the one that it's that control a turf and it's physically present on a territory. Imagine this hypothetical scenario. You pay the protection money to a boss for 30 years. So you have a factory in the center of New York. At one point, you receive a message that someone stole all your sensitive data and ask you to pay a monthly fee.
That's
what
right.
the owner of the factory should do in these circumstances.
That's right.
To go back to the boss and said, oh, I paid the protection man for so long. How can you protect me from this random ware attack? And so this is a new scenario. And I think organized crime is nothing then adaptive. And this, the American Mafia will be, for the American Mafia, will be a great challenge. If there would be people like Andrew Mash Russo that I have a hard time to adapt to the new technology, that would be, they will face hard time. If there will be people capable to adapt to new situation, maybe they will be.
Before we get to the last question, you're gonna think I'm crazy, but I want you to jostle this around in your mind. I think the mafia of the future, obviously the way Ndrangheta operates, but you brought it up exactly, where they're going to extort you digitally, and it's to come form of a security company that nobody would ever steal your data, but it's almost like the breaking the glass, right? But here's the difference though, and this is if they do it correctly. And if any criminals are listening, I'll send you the bill. They're going to create deep fakes to do it. It's going to be an Antonio Nicaso, a Tom LaVecchia. You need to pay this, you need to, and maybe the ear will shift a little bit, but it's gonna be the same as this conversation and responsive to a live conversation. And when law enforcement goes to track the IP address and track to the 20th shell company, it's gonna be gone. They're gonna use deep fakes to step in for these cyber crimes. And these are gonna be exactly that, up in the air. I know that sounds crazy, but I think that's
it's not crazy because actually the FBI and many other police, they were able to create this application called Anom.
Yes.
And make criminals to believe that they were using a very safe application to communicate. And so, of course, there will be, but at the same time, I have information about major criminal groups hiring really great hackers and experts in cybercrime to deal with this challenge. So it's always this challenge between criminals and law enforcement, and who invest more. And you know, when you deal in cocaine, in any other criminal activity, you generate a lot of cash, a lot of profit, and you can make a huge investment in that field of cybercrime. On law enforcement perspective, it's a challenge. Sometimes they said, oh, we don't have enough money in our budget. They always complain about the money in the budget. So it's a big challenge, but also it's a new stage of organized crime.
Well, my only beef is you add some guys with a vowel at the end of the name, and all of a sudden the feds have the money. But l'ultima domanda I want to ask you is, and I ask this for every guest, and this is, if I had to ask you again a second question, this is what I wanted to know. If you can have a dinner, an elongated dinner, an Italian dinner with any mafiosi, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Actually, I never liked the idea of having dinner. I'm more comfortable to have a coffee with a
table. Un espresso, yeah.
No, I definitely, I enjoy my conversation with Joe Bonanno at one point.
Oh, wow.
Yes, the idea to sit down with Matteo Messina Denaro and talking to him with a table.
I never heard of that one. Wow.
Me and him, yes, that would be like a great opportunity.
That would be chess right there.
That's right. But yes, I'm a type of person that like the idea to talk with two criminals, but always concerned because you don't want to pass the limit. You don't want to you don't want to be friends with them.
Correct.
Because that's what they're looking for. They try to talk with you and then try to be friends, and it's the dangerous side of the conversation. If you able to maintain the distance, it's great. You can get some stuff. Otherwise, they will never say anything explicitly. But if you were born in the same area, same territory, even a silence, even a word said in a proper way, you can understand.
That's right. That's why you know what, if there was a pay-per-view with you and him calling in from a Zoom and you there, I know maybe the decentralized espresso, that would sell out fantastically. So I just want to say un sincero grazie per essere qui oggi per Spettacolo Mio, my show, and era un ore sinceramente. I really appreciate you being here. This was an honor for me. It's been a privilege. Someday you and I will do it in Italian. I speak more dialect, but it's really an honor. And if you are anywhere near New York, please call me. We could have our espressatino together. I might not be as enlightening as they are, but I think we'd have a nice time.
Fantastic. Thank you for having me, Tom. It was a real pleasure.
Sorry
for my voice. It's a little bit lower.
It's all right. Thank you so much.
Grazie.